Ordinarily, when a Disney film has been censored years after the fact because of racism, I often think it needs to be uncensored to be an educational part of history. However, with Cannibal Capers, I can't really think that. This is pretty shocking. It's a pretty shocking interpretation of black natives, presumably African natives here. It's not, they're not signaling out one specific race or culture, but just in general, the depiction of the black characters in this, um, even I can't sugarcoat it as being an educational moment about treatment of black people in history. It's pretty gobsmacking. It's also not very enjoyable. The animation style is, by which I mean the characters are dancing quite a bit, and I think the way they move is quite nice. The actual fluidity of the animation works really well. The depth of the background animations are really beautiful. That's visually very appealing. The way they did the skulls works really well. The lion is very interesting. But the actual narrative itself, it's not even funny. It's 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 pretty dark. And that's coming from me who thinks that things should be slightly educational rather than hidden away. I'm not going to talk too much about the actual animation design of these black characters because it's just not worth the time. If you want to see what they're like, check this out. Um, but it is pretty offensive. The narrative itself, to me, just seems really weird as well, and is unusual because I'm a huge fan of silly symphonies. There are some silly symphonies that are maybe weaker than others, but I don't think there's a silly symphony where I've actively thought this should not exist. Whereas this one, that broke that mold. It was released in 1930, directed by Burt Gillett or Gillett. I never know how to pronounce that name. And it basically focuses on this group of cannibals, and they're doing a tribal dance. These are, of course, black characters. It's a very poor depiction of what I assume is meant to be an African tribe. And then all of a sudden, this lion comes along and begins to kind of chase one of the cannibals. I won't say what happens after that in case you do watch it, but I'll say it kind of gets a little bit weird. Um, Not necessarily very believable, which I guess is a good thing. Because if it ends in a way that is quite silly and doesn't seem believable, maybe we can say, well, the depictions of certain individuals in this are not believable either. But I still think that doesn't really cut it. Interestingly, at the time, if you look on Wikipedia, there are some quotes from various periodicals. The Film Daily said this is one of Walt Disney's best silly symphonies to date. Billboard said plenty of laughs to this animated cartoon of the Walt Disney Silly Symphony series. They also go on to say something, something, something. Lion first chases the black skin around. Yada yada yada. That's that's horrible. Yeah. So the written reviews are an interesting historical look at the treatment of certain individuals. The cartoon itself makes me feel uncomfortable. And it's so unusual that any Disney does that for me. It just is the antithesis of Disney magic. I also found the narrative to just be a little bit weird. And this is coming from me, who loves and worships anything weird and unusual. So, I have finally found a silly symphony that I do not recommend. Well, part of me recommends you watch it just to see what it's like. But I certainly wouldn't recommend it for entertainment purposes. I don't think it's something that you should watch to enjoy it. And again, this may be the first silly symphony where I've got basically nothing positive to say. As I said, the actual editing of the animation looks pretty good. Some of the sound effects are pretty good, and the background scenery is really nice. Yep, that's about as far as I can go. Cannibal Capers is interesting, and unfortunately, not for the right reasons.